Today is the 8th day of February 2015, and we are honored to have Dr. Sampadananda Mishra with us again for the 5th talk on Sanskrit. Welcome.
Namaste.
Namaste. Please tell us what is the subject today.
Today I'm going to speak about the meters, or as it is known in Sanskrit as Chhandas. It's one of the most favorite topics of mine. Usually, the meters or the Chhandas are understood to be the very physical basis of poetry. And Sri Aurobindo, in his future poetry, when he speaks about the mantras or the highest grade of poetry, he speaks of three intensities. The intensity of rhythm, the intensity of the thought substance, the intensity of the soul's vision of truth. When these three highest intensities come into unison, we have the possibility of mantra, or the highest kind of poetry. And in this, the first fundamental and indispensable element is the rhythmic movement, which is usually translated as Chhandas. But most of the times, this Chhandas is confined or limited only to poetry. Now Sri Aurobindo speaks of a different aspect of the Chhandas. He speaks of a cosmic meter, a universal rhythmic movement. And it is because of this universal rhythmic movement, everything in this creation is sustained in its right manner. It is this universal rhythmic movement, or the cosmic meter, which is responsible for bringing this creation out of the supreme reality. It is at the basis of everything in this creation. And these Chhandas, the Chhandas that we find in poetry, the Chhandas that we find in music, the Chhandas or the rhythmic movement that we find in dance, the rhythmic movement that we find in the sculpture, in painting, in different movements of the creature, in the nature, and the rhythmic movement that we find in our heartbeat, the rhythmic movement that we find in our pulse, all these give us a very different experience of the Chhandas. Look at how a leaf falls from the tree. It has its own rhythmic movement. Look at the sea waves, how beautifully, how rhythmically, one after another, they come and touch the shore and then go back. They give us a very different experience, and in that experience there is the delight, there is the joy, and it is basically the rhythmic movement which generates this joy and clarity. That's exactly is the root sense of the word Chhandas in Sanskrit. It comes from the root sound chand, which means to gladden, to generate joy. And all the different patterns that we find in music, in dance, in sculpture, in poetry, these are representatives of the great cosmic meter. And it is through these rhythmic movements, or through these small patterns, that we can grow conscious of that great cosmic meter which sustains the creation, which sustains everything in this universe. And because of this great cosmic meter, the planets move around the orbit in the right manner. It is because of this the seasons come one after another. Everything in this creation follows its own movement, own rhythm because of this great cosmic meter. And when there is a collapse, when there is a disturbance in this cosmic meter, we have natural calamities. We have tsunami, earthquake, storm, cyclone, and whatnot. And when this imbalance, this disturbance happens at an individual level, we fall sick. Sickness or ailment or any disease or infirmity is the result of this disharmony. Maintaining well-being is to tune ourselves back into our inner harmony, the subtle music of our own, the rhythm of our own. And when we discover that, every aspect of our life becomes chandomaya, full of chandas, full of rhythm. And that keeps us joyful. We experience joy and delight and ananda, the bliss, in every aspect of our life. That was the purpose when the ancient Indian rishis or seers or the seer poets, they discovered enormous amount of chandas. The purpose was not just to cast the sounds into some metrical pattern to create poetry. The purpose was how to grow through these patterns, conscious of that great cosmic meter or the universal rhythmic pattern or the universal rhythmic movement, and make every aspect of life chandomaya, full of rhythm. That was the purpose. And for them, the meters were not just any conventional system or the physical pattern. They were full of life. And they could experience the liveliness in these patterns. That was the beauty of discovering enormous amount of chandas. Now these chandas are the gate of inspiration for a poet. The first and foremost thing that a poet has to have is a metrical mood. And once the poet enters into this metrical mood, then he doesn't have to make any effort for composing any poetry. The thoughts, the emotions, the words, everything flow into and take their own position in the poetry. That is where the poetry begins. This is the first and fundamental element in poetic creation. And it is because of the chandas, it is because of this rhythmic movement that everything becomes immortal. The secret of immortality lies in this balanced harmony. It is basically the harmony, the law of harmony, which is sought after when the ancient Indian seers or the seer poets, the rishis, the kavis, they talked about the chandas or they dealt with the chandas. Now Sri Aurobindo has a very fascinating interpretation where he says that as the human being has various layers of his being, like he has the physical being, there is a physical man, and within that physical man there is the sensational man, the vital man, and within that there is the emotional man, and within that the intellectual man, and within that there is the delight of the spirit, and at the core of the being sits the spirit. In the same way, he compares these different layers of human being with the different aspects of the chandas. He says the physical basis, the physical framework of the meter is the body. And within that, there is the sensational element which refers to the arrangement of the sounds quantitatively or accentually. This quantitative or accentual arrangement of sounds in a meter is the sensational element in the meter. And within that, there is the emotional element, which means the arrangement of sounds in a particular order, the pauses, the assonance, the alliterations, the selection of the sounds. This is the emotional aspect. And then within that, there is the intellectual element which governs everything, which brings the restraint into the law of harmony. Without this intellectual element, there will be no harmony. It's the driver, it's the charioteer of the meter, the intellectual element. And within that, there is the poetic delight. And within that, there sits the spirit of the poetry. And it is because of this spirit, one poet differs from another poet. And when we speak of the Chhandas, or when the ancient Indian seers spoke about the Chhandas, they always referred to this spirit. How this spirit can be brought, this element can be brought to make the poetry or to raise the poetry to the highest level, to the level of mantra. And these different Chhandas, or the different metrical patterns that we find, especially in Sanskrit. These patterns are there in every language. In a deeper sense, when the rhythmic movement wants to express itself, when it comes into the field of language, it expresses itself in the form of poetry. When it comes to a sculptor, it expresses itself in the form of sculpture, and it expresses itself in the form of dance in a dancer, in the form of music, different musical patterns in a musician, and different patterns in an artist. So it takes different forms, depends upon which instrument is utilizing this rhythmic movement. Depending upon the instrument, it gets translated into different forms. And these different metrical patterns that we have in Sanskrit, they are infinite in number. One can't say that there are only these many meters or these many patterns. There is no end to patterns. One can always create a new pattern and add to the list. Ananta, infinite, is the only one word that can suit for this purpose. The Chhandas are Ananta, and there is no expression. The ancient Indian seers say that there is no word which is devoid of Chhandas. And they realized the importance of this rhythmic movement to this extent that everything that they wanted to express, they cast into this metrical pattern. If you look at Sanskrit literature, 99% literature in Sanskrit is in the form of poetry. Whether it's philosophy or science or psychology or geography or any form of knowledge, mathematics or dictionaries, everything is composed in the form of poetry. Because it is through the poetry the highest can be brought into, the highest spirit can be experienced. Because it is the poetry which has the power to heighten our consciousness and connect us with something higher. It's not that the prose writings do not have the metrical rhythm. They do have, but in poetry, the poetic intonation, the poetic movement is far greater than the prose movement or the prose intonation. Because here in poetry, all kinds of intensities, the intensity of rhythm, the intensity of substance, the intensity of the vision of the truth, the poetic vision, they meet and become oneness. And on this oneness and sameness, or the eternal unity, the whole diversity is based. That's the beauty of the Chhandas. And coming to the Chhandas in particular, and especially to Sanskrit, the Sanskrit Chhandas, the Chhandas used by the Sanskrit poets, we have many interesting and fascinating observations. Now, whole of the ancient Indian knowledge system, if we analyze critically and deeply, this is what I myself have found, that the entire knowledge system, the ancient Indian knowledge system, the guiding principle, the fundamental principle which guided the ancient Indian seers, sages, or the thinkers to bring out different aspects of the knowledge was this, that everything they discovered intuitively and developed logically. And we have several examples. One can take into consideration the Ayurveda. One can take into consideration many of the elements which are there in Sanskrit literature, where this was the guiding principle, that everything was discovered intuitively and intuition was given much importance. The same thing also happened in the case of Chhandas. When they discovered certain metrical pattern or a kind of rhythmic movement, when they experienced it, felt it, so immediately they turned to the nature to find out some resemblance of it in the nature. If they could discover any resemblance, anything similar to something which they have experienced in the nature, they took it as a confirmation. So the nature was a kind of confirmation to their own experiences, their feelings, their knowledge system, or whatever they felt within or they saw within. So if we analyze or take into consideration the different names of the Chhandas, why these particular Chhandas or the particular patterns, they are given a particular name. It's a very fascinating, inspiring and very interesting observation which I have discovered, I myself have discovered, that this is what I ask to the participants who sometimes ask me to take a session on the Chhandas. I ask them, have you ever seen how does a snake move? Yes, we have seen it. How does it move? Oh, it moves in a zigzag manner. Then I ask them, how many times the snake moves straight and how many times it moves curved? Straight? No. Impossible. Okay. How can there be a curved movement without a straight movement? If there was only curved movement, so the snake would have been at one place, circling and circling and circling. It is the straight movement which gives the direction. And how many times the snake moves straight and how many times curved? We have not observed. Because our education system has not given us a platform where we could develop the keen power of observation. But the ancient Indian seers had a very highest level of the power of keen observation, very penetrated observation. They did not miss anything. Now I have checked it with many snake experts and they have confirmed it to me that the snake moves once straight and 2 times curved. And this was the observation. Some seer or some poet must have felt a kind of rhythmic movement in him, and when he turned to the nature, he discovered the same rhythmic movement in the snake's movement and recognized it as a chanda, as a metrical pattern, and named it as Bhujanga Prayatam. Bhujanga means snake, Prayatam means movement. How does it fit to snake's movement? In a meter, in Sanskrit, all the syllables in a metrical line, they're divided into groups of 3. And then the syllabic arrangement or the arrangement of the sounds by short and long within that group of 3s, they are taken into consideration and a scheme is prepared, and based on that scheme we know what Chhandas it is. Now in Bhujanga Prayatam there are 12 syllables in each metrical line. We need to remember that 4 metrical lines together make a poem or make a verse in Sanskrit. And especially in the kind of even meters or samavrittas, where all the 4 metrical lines have to follow the same arrangement of sounds, same pause pattern, same arrangement in every aspect, same number of syllables. So these are called even meters. So in Bhujanga Prayatam, there are 12 syllables in each line. Altogether we have 48 syllables in Bhujanga Prayatam. And when we scan it, the arrangement of syllables by short and long, we find that one short syllable followed by 2 long syllables. The short is the straight movement of the snake and long is the curved movement of the snake. Short, long, long, short, long, long, short, long, long, short, long, long. This is the pattern that is followed in Bhujanga Prayatam. And there is a beautiful hymn by Shankaracharya. It's called Bhavanyashtakam. And there are 8 stanzas where Goddess Bhavani is invoked, adored and extolled. And it's in this meter, Bhujanga Prayatam. Now I sing the first stanza of Bhavanyashtakam, which is in Bhujanga Prayatam, and my purpose is to illustrate Bhujanga Prayatam by singing the first stanza of Bhavanyashtakam composed by Shankaracharya in Bhujanga Prayatam. Na tato na mata na bandhor na data na putro na putri na bhrutyo na bharata na jaya na vidya na vrittir mamaiva gatistvam gatistvam tvameka bhavani gatistvam gatistvam tvameka bhavani. This is Bhujanga Prayatam, where one short syllable followed by 2 long syllables, and in every line we have 12 syllables following this arrangement of sounds. Similarly, we have another long meter in Sanskrit called Shardula Vikreditam. Shardula Vikreditam has 19 syllables in each line. And the name given to it is very, very interesting and fascinating. The meaning of the name of this meter is tiger's play. Shardula is tiger, play is its movement, or its Vikreditam is the play. Now, how does the tiger's play is imitated in the sound arrangement of this meter? Then I ask the participants, or whomever I am talking about, the Chhandas or Shardula Vikreditam especially, I ask them, have you ever seen when a tiger wants to attack its prey, what's its position? What are the movements? A tiger, before it attacks its prey, it sits leaned back, very much poised, and when the prey comes close to it, so from that position it takes a long leap followed by short leaps. The first leap of the tiger is a very long leap, and then followed by short leaps. And in the meter Shardula Vikreditam, we have 19 syllables. Now there is a particular arrangement of sounds, but here it's not the arrangement of sounds by short and long which bring in this element of tiger's play, but the harmonic pause that is there in this meter which brings the Shardula Vikreditam, the tiger's movement or tiger's play. Now, when someone has to recite a verse composed in Shardula Vikreditam, so he can't sing all the syllables together. One has to take a pause at certain place. And in Shardula Vikreditam, so from syllable number 1 to 12 has to be recited in one breath. So one starts and then pauses straight on the 12th syllable, imitating the first leap or the long leap of the tiger, then on the 19th syllable. So 12 by 7 is the pause pattern in Shardula Vikreditam. To illustrate this, let me recite a verse in Shardula Vikreditam. Kasturi tilakam lalata patale vakshasthale kaustubham nasagre varamoktikam karatale venum kare kankanam sarvange harichandanancha kalayan कंठे च मुक्तावलिं गोपस्त्री परिवेष्टितो विजयते गोपालचूडामणि. So when someone recites Kasturi Tilakam Lalata Patale, these 12 syllables have to be recited in one breath, imitating the long leaf of the tiger. So every name that is given to the different Chhandas, one finds some resemblance or something which is there in the nature. There's again a beautiful meter called Vamsha Patra Patitam, which means the falling of a bamboo leaf. And when a bamboo leaf falls, it's a great experience to see it. Nowadays, most of the times, 24 hours we spend inside the room, AC room. We have no connection with the nature. We don't know whether it's day or night, it's raining or not raining, or beautiful breeze is moving or not. We live in one climate. But when we go out and we see, I have lived in the village, I was brought up in the village, and it was amazing for us to see all the beautiful things in the nature. We had a bamboo forest right in front of our house in the village, and every time a leaf falls from the bamboo tree, it reminds me of Vamshapatra Patitam, the meter which has got 22 syllables, and the arrangement of sounds in those meters. When a bamboo leaf falls, it falls tick, 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 tick horizontally, and then straight, then you have a kind of curved movement, tick, 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 then straight, and then it comes down. Watching it itself is an experience. Beautiful. And the same movement is imitated in the sound arrangement of that meter. Amazing things we discover when we analyze the meters. And if this way the different metrical patterns are explained to the students or the children, they are fascinated to take up this study of Chhandas, and they discover something more intense which help in bringing the Chhandas or the rhythm, the music into their own life. And the whole purpose of the Chhandas is to make every aspect of our life Chandomaya, and to grow conscious of that inner music, that subtle music which is there behind every pattern. Thank you.
I have one question for you. Elaborate a little more if you would. You said it first comes in through the physical and then in through the emotional?
It doesn't come first through the emotional, but when we look at man, we look at his physical being first. So in the poetry,
Yes.
so first we have this physical pattern, the arrangement of syllables,
Right.
the metrical lines, the arrangement of sounds, the emotion, and then we have the poetic delight or the rasa, and then the thing. So like as we have the man, the physical form we see, and then within that man we find the sensational being, the
Right.
emotional being,
Right.
the mental being or intellectual being, and then the real being, the inner being, the spirit. So in the same way you find in the meter also these
But
elements.
the poetic inspiration comes intuitively.
Intuitively. It comes intuitively.
Okay.
But first the poet has to enter into this metrical mood. So this
Okay.
metrical mood for a poet has the first importance. And once the poet has entered into that mood or that metrical mold, that pattern, then everything flows effortlessly. Till then one has to keep on, trying.
Relating to the Chhandas, what lines, or have you found most of the lines in Savitri to be, because it's iambic pentameter generally, what is that rhythm of Chhandas?
I have not experimented or have not, made any effort towards finding out the element of Chhandas in Sri Aurobindo's writings. But what Sri Aurobindo himself says that in Savitri he has made an attempt to bring in the Kalidasian movement and
Yes.
then the Upanishadic movement
Yes.
as far as possible. And then when he speaks about Kalidas, he speaks about him as the greatest of the poets. And when he speaks of the Upanishads, he considers Upanishads as the greatest poetry. And if anyone wants to experience what is poetry of highest nature, one should turn to the Upanishads. And when he tries to bring in those movements in Savitri, he must have implemented most of the elements of the Chhandas, of the ancient seer poets in his compositions.
And would you say the Isha Upanishad is one of the highest of the Upanishads?
Sorry, I
Is
didn't.
Isha
Isha
Upanishad.
Yes. So Isha Upanishad, yes, definitely. It is a great poetry, and then the whole vision which is there in the Isha Upanishad, it's the highest of its kind.
Thank you so much.
Yes.